Hello, welcome to Shrink Wrap. I'm Szifra Birke, a coach, life coach and professional coach. And today I'm delighted to have with us Jay Livingston, who's going to talk about proven methods to change almost anything. Jay is an executive coach who has over 30 years experience working with business owners and key employees. He works with people to help change any sort of work habit, personal habit, leadership and team issues, and no need to go on any further. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you.
So, given that we're talking today about proven methods to change almost anything, can we talk about how people go about building or changing habits? Is that a good launching spot?
Yeah, no, that's a great launching spot. A habit is, some people think of it as just a behavior, but a habit really is something that happens in your brain, and it's kind of important to know that if you're going to figure out how to break the habit. So when we start doing something, our brain creates a pathway, a little information loop in our brain. And the more we use that pathway, the more we build actually insulation around it that makes it more and more impervious to changes. It's the opposite, but very similar to a little tiny stream has a little bit of water running through it, and if it goes long enough, it digs deeper, becomes a river, and if it goes really long, it becomes a habit, like, say, smoking. Well, that's the Grand Canyon of digging grooves into your brain. So the neurons in your brain literally create these very stable patterns, habits.
So you're saying that if I do something over and over and over again, which is what my hand's demonstrating, that I'm literally in my brain, I am creating a deeper and deeper and deeper groove, so that it's more likely that I'm just going to go stimulus response here to there.
Right. And the groove works because you kind of fall into the groove and you don't have to think anymore. You just go. And your brain really doesn't want to have to think. Your brain uses energy, and so it would prefer to be on coast. So anything that takes energy, like trying to climb out of this groove, your brain's going to tend to resist. And things that take energy are decisions. So if you're doing a new thing in a new and different way, your brain takes energy. And it goes, let's just go the old way. This way's proven, this way is easy, this way is normal.
So that would explain pretty easily why people would stay in the same groove. And that if a person wanted to change a habit, if they wanted to save more money rather than spend more money, eat better food, i.e., then eat what's really tasty, be a leader who can just vent and be angry rather than one who's making a good connection. That person,
or stop venting and start talking, either way.
Yes, yep. Right. So in those situations, the person has to be very deliberate and very intentional, because the brain is really not their friend in this situation.
Yes, and there's some examples that are really good. If you've ever played a musical instrument, you play scales often. That's how you learn to put your fingers on the right poles or on the right keys, or get the bow on the right string.
Yeah.
And as you're playing those scales, you need to play each note very slowly, very deliberately. Have I got the A? Have I got the C? Have I, whatever that particular thing is, have I got it? Have I got it? And you go very, very slowly.
Yeah.
And it's only when you get a little better that you can speed up, because now you have a pattern that your brain can begin to follow. Those who watch a lot of sports know that there's a big thing about learn the basics. And the basics are practicing and practicing and practicing until when you're in a game, you don't have to think about it. You don't think about the way you're going to shoot the basket, because you've done that you've created that pathway, you've got that groove dug. You can be paying attention to something else.
Yeah, interesting. So would that be the same as, I guess this may be the time to tell the audience that you're not only my business partner, but you happen to be my husband, so I know some of your habits.
And that's one habit I like, is being
So, thank you. So is this similar to how in the evening you would normally, in the past, have gone to the freezer for ice cream after dinner? and now you go to the freezer and you grab frozen blueberries, and we may as well give them the really good little.
I give them the recipe here. The thing to start thinking about is that we act, and particularly in habit situations, we tend to act because there's some signal that we get, some cue. And for me, it might be walking into the kitchen, and suddenly I've got this feeling like I want to do something, because my habit is I walk in the kitchen at that time at night, and then I walk over and I get out the ice cream and I scoop myself some. And so, you know, in the past, people say, I got to stop that habit. And it's very difficult when you think about a stream running down the river. It's very difficult to stop it. It just doesn't work well that way. So instead, what you do is you create an alternative. So you use the same beginning place, the same cue is what scientists call it, the same signal. You use the same beginning place. And so as you get your momentum going, you create a detour. And eventually that detour becomes the new path. And you try to get down there to the same reward place. So I walk into the kitchen and I'm thinking ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, and I go, no, very slowly, do what you weren't planning on doing. Get out the yogurt, get some frozen blueberries, put it in the yogurt, blend it up. It'll taste just like soft ice cream, a little sweetener, but not much. And so I've got a new action. And then I end up in the same place. It's sweet because I use a non-caloric sweetener. It's sweet, it's cold, it's got the right consistency. And so I'm not stopping eating ice cream, I'm starting eating this other.
Yeah, and so you said a couple of important things. One is that detour, but you're starting the same place. And the other is, you said, and I get the same thing. So is that the same thing, the same reward?
Yeah. And by same, what we're really talking about is that you experience it in a similar kind of way. So I don't need ice cream. I kind of want cold, I want something in my mouth, I kind of like the flavors of something, whatever. And I kind of get to that. The other way to think about this that's really important is people go out to stop doing something. And there's an old thing that says, can you stop thinking about pink elephants? And of course, all you can do is think about pink elephants. But if somebody says, when you're thinking about pink elephants, would you start thinking about green elephants? You start thinking, green elephants, what are green? And you stop thinking about pink. And that's creating this new path.
Right.
So we try to create something new to kind of detour and get rid of the old one.
Right. So it's a couple of things jump to mind for me. I was just thinking about smoking. And for me, smoking ended when I was 27. And the audience probably can recognize that I'm many decades past 27. So even all those decades ago when I stopped, there's some residual though that hangs on, which is that anyone who knows me very long knows that I'm rarely not fidgeting or holding something, which is what remains for me from that habit. Now, it doesn't cost me lung cancer to have a pen in my hand or to be a little bit fidgety, but it is interesting that it's not like the habits necessarily all go away if there's no replacement.
So we could suggest, though, that when you get the cue, which could have been feeling a little anxious or wanting to do something or feeling fidgety, and you used to pull out a cigarette, that was the action you did.
Yeah.
Now you get that cue, you have a new action. I'll play with a pen. I just put something in my hand, I fiddle. And the reward is somewhat similar. Now, it's not exactly similar, but at this point in your life, it's a similar reward. There's some degree of contentment, satisfaction, whatever that happens here.
Well, you're right, and interestingly, if we use that example, there's a secondary for me, which is that I have gum sitting in certain spots, and there are times I notice unconsciously that I reach over, and it's very much the same time I would have reached for a cigarette. So
if you were starting right now to change, you would say, what are the cues when I pick up a cigarette? What are the cues when I pick up my food? What are those cues? Can I pick something else to do that has some of the satisfaction of it that gets me, you know, to that reward? Some other slightly different kind of thing. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's how we build a habit. So a habit really is this neural pathway, and it's there because our brains want to save energy. They just want to, you know, do what's easy. And if we're going to change that, we need to say very purposefully, very deliberately, here's a new pathway. And generally have to start off fairly slowly, very deliberately, and be paying attention. And it's hard to pay attention. So when you're building a new habit, the biggest problem most people get is they don't pay attention enough, and they're already doing the old one, the automatic. The brain pushed the automatic button. And so a whole lot of this process we get going is that you need to practice.
Yeah, and where are the reminders? And some of those can come internal. I know for my clients, the function I have with many of them is to be that external reminder. How did you do this week on whatever the habit is or the behavior that, or attitude or philosophy that they're trying to shift? Yeah.
And often that's what we try to do, is put something different in their environment that's a little bit jarring. I had somebody who was trying to start a habit. They were trying to start the habit of, in the old days, syncing their phone, their calendar, as it were, to their computer. And you had to plug it in those days. Don't have to do that so much anymore. And he could never remember at night. And so he said, what's the last thing you do at night? I turn off the lights. So how about at the last light switch you turn off, we put a reminder to remind you, oh, did you do that? And so then he said, sure. So I had him take a Snickers bar, put a thumbtack in it, and thumbtack it right above the switch. And it was so odd that it broke his kind of mindless concentration on getting to bed, and he started doing it. And after 3 or 4 days, he said, oh, this is working great. And I said, great, now change it, put something else there. I think he had a velvet Elvis doll or something he pinned up. And we went through a number of iterations until it became this new habit he did, and he didn't need the reminders anymore.
Yeah, that was certainly creative. Sounds like you. So one of the things that you're saying is that, these aren't your words, but the brain is kind of lazy and it wants to go the path that it's going, and so we have to nudge it over into a new direction. And the other thing I'm hearing is, kind of embedded in this, is you have to do it again and again and again. So repetition seems important here. Is there something to say about that?
Yeah, repetition is so important, and it's what most people just don't want to do because it's boring. It takes energy, it takes brain energy, and at the end of a long day or after you've made a lot of decisions which take energy, you're less likely to want to do this thing. So you need to set it up and practice. And again, it'd be like playing a piano or learning to swing a tennis racket or a golf club. You need to set aside often specific practice times and say, for the next hour, every time I think this, I'm going to do that, or let me just practice walking through the kitchen without picking up any food, or you start to do these kinds of things to repeat. It's hard to get enough repetitions. It's just plain hard. It's difficult to do. One of the things that I think about is in terms of the daily health habits, like taking care of your teeth. Most people don't floss as much as they should. If that's a habit you were trying to change, you would say, how can I get enough repetitions? Well, at least once a night, you have an opportunity. Can you use it? So how can you remind yourself that here's a chance to build this new habit? And then don't make it too hard. Make it pretty simple. Take a little tiny first step. And what might that be? What if you were to get the floss out and floss one tooth and throw it away and go to bed? You're developing the habit of stopping and flossing. And later you can get to 2, 5, 20 teeth. But it is a small step, and you get the repetition, and you're more likely to do it, so you begin to build this pathway.
Yeah.
And of course, the reward is you get to go to bed, which you got to anyway, and then you also get to feel a little bit good about it. So it's a little extra reward, so you're more likely to do that.
Yeah. So there's something about making a commitment to yourself, deciding and following through, and making the goal small enough that you're going to be successful. That's what, I mean, it's kind of funny to think about flossing one tooth, but really, I'd never thought of that a person could do that. But really, that's kind of successfully approximating to the goal, isn't it? So at some point, you're hoping to floss every night, all your teeth, but what's wrong with starting somewhere?
Right.
And that would be true with what other kinds of habits?
Well, I do want to say that a lot of people, when you suggest this idea to them, say, well, that's silly. It's too small. It's too easy. I can do better than that. And then they tend to fail. So one of the things to do is to crank our expectations back and say, if you're going to be successful, do a little thing. Just do that little part. Another example that a lot of people kind of get, even though it's not a people example, is I used to work with dogs, and teaching a dog to come is a very small step. And people say, I want my dog to come to me. And I'd say, reward your dog for, if you're over here and you call your dog, turning and looking. And if they turn and look, that's kind of an approximation of what you're looking for. They're kind of heading towards you. Reward them. Well, when it comes to habits you have, it's the same thing. What if you decide you want to quit smoking and you stop for, the hour between 3 and 4? That's fine. There's a small step. Be pleased with yourself. Reward yourself.
Right.
What else could be a small step? People say, I want to exercise. And it's like, exercise is a number of things. How about walking? They say, oh, no, I really want to get in shape. Well, take the time when you think you might want to be exercising and go for a 20-minute walk.
Well, I can think of one that I think you may use also, I'm not sure, and that's for the kinds of head down and go entrepreneurs that we might be working with, who are very consumed with all the ideas. When they're home with their families, it's really hard to turn it off, including turning off the technology. So I ask my client, could you do 10 tech-free minutes with your kids?
There you go.
And literally, you can set your phone to alarm you in 10 minutes, but it needs to be in another room. And at first they laugh and say, oh, 10 minutes, I should be able to do 10 minutes. But discover that 10 minutes is actually tough if you're used to being plugged in all the time. But that's really a good way to start.
Yeah, that's one of those small steps. And it gets you feeling what's going to happen. It maybe sets it up at a specific time that you can expand on. It gives you a sense of success. In the field, you talk about people having the ability to understand and feel like they have control, and call it agency. It gives you that feeling that I maybe could change this, which is another thing that's very important about change, is that what we know is that people who feel that they're fixed, this is the way I am, I'm a smoker, I'm 50 pounds overweight, I don't exercise, I yell at people, whatever their particular habit may be. I'm always getting up late, When they feel like fixed, they will tend to not change.
As opposed to?
They feel like this is some place they can grow, they can learn, they can change. And so you're more successful with an athlete let me start the other way. If an athlete says, I'm a natural, they're probably going to plateau. The athlete that says, I'm not that good, but I'm going to keep practicing, that they're more likely. Those of you who remember Larry Bird and Michael Jordan, they were not natural athletes. They practiced like crazy. And often those people will go beyond the fixed thing.
Yeah.
So if we think of ourselves one way, we need to start saying, that's who I've been. I can change this.
Right. It's interesting because that really probably characterizes most of the clients who would come for the kind of coaching that you offer or I offer. They would be people who want to change. They'd be people who expect to change, even if it's hard. They have a certain kind of willingness, perseverance, some grit to try to stick with something.
But often discouraged.
Yes. But
had a lot of failures.
Yes.
And failures, by the way, are an indication that you're, quote, practicing. You don't like to have the failures. We could try to get around them, and it may mean they're taking too big a step. But those are people who are making an effort and are likely to end up changing.
Yeah. So are you saying that because someone has tried, whether it's, again, to use these examples, losing weight or quitting smoking or communicating differently with their team members or with their spouse, whatever those things are, because they've tried unsuccessfully doesn't mean that they have to continue being unsuccessful. It may be that they need some tweak in the system that they're using.
I work with a lot of clients who are given projects or take on projects. And they come to me and say, I'm not finishing my projects on time, or I'm not doing as good a job as I would like to do. And we look at the process of doing the projects and try to change. And one of the things we talk about is not waiting till the deadline, and instead setting a start date. And that alone can be very powerful, but it is so difficult. People will set a start date and they say, I do that, but then I ignore it. I do that and then I do a little bit, but then I quit. And so you see there's, quote, failures, but they're beginning to practice getting started on a day that's here rather than waiting to the deadline that's over here. And and you know, that's that process of failing and then succeeding. You can see repetition in there. You can see they're trying to build that new detour. You can see their old habit come in. There are all these things. You know, change is, it's scientific. It is brain science. You know, and we can use that to make it easier and easier for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So at this stage, we're actually, in the show, we're actually coming close to the end, and there may be some really important things that you want to underscore?
Yeah, there's one that's really important, is if you make a decision to change, and particularly on a very discrete step, I'm going to get up at 7 o'clock, don't redecide it.
Don't re-decide.
That's it. Don't re-decide it. And many people will say, I'm going to get up at 7 o'clock, the alarm goes off, they punch it and say, well, I'll snooze. That's re-deciding. They say, I'm not going to eat between meals. They walk through the kitchen. It wouldn't really hurt to, that's re-deciding. And re-deciding gets us in trouble because we tend to do it when we're tired or we're hungry or we're emotionally kind of upset or something. You don't want to re-decide. Stick with it. Say something to yourself. Talk yourself through the experience. I've already decided. Just do it. I've already decided to get up. Just do it. I already decided to go work out. Just do it. I already decided to not eat between meals. Just do it. And talk yourself through it.
Yeah, this has been one of the really helpful pieces of advice that you've shared with clients that I've learned to talk with mine about. And one of the salient things you say is that you make the decision when you have your best, these aren't your words, but your best thinking.
Yep.
And so, you know, really sit back, and think about what is it that I want. So in the morning, if I'm going to wake up at 7:15, then why don't I set the alarm for 7:15 as opposed to 7 and then, well, we'll see when I get up, hit the snooze.
Doesn't work.
And it doesn't work because?
Because in that redeciding, you will make choices based in the moment, more likely than the way you did the night before, where you were thinking about the long-term thing. And you don't want to have any room for wiggle, because now you start bringing in redeciding, and you start maybe flowing into the old pattern. Yeah,
it's kind of like getting a brain hijack or something, because the brain is in a certain way, the brain is pulling you toward the familiar.
That's what saves energy. That's what's comfortable. Let's do that. It doesn't quite fit in this. I don't care. It works. Let's do it. No. So you're having this conversation in your brain when you're redeciding.
There's like a big magnet over here to do what's familiar because it saves energy. It's easier.
And if you just say, nope, I'm not thinking about it. Maybe tomorrow I'll think about it. I've decided. I'm just going to do it. I've already decided. Don't redecide. Just do it. Talk yourself. If you keep talking, you can't hear your other thoughts. Get up, get up, get up, get up.
Flex, I often think about that my clients, or for myself, that I'm flexing a muscle. Like I've flexed one of them a lot, and so it's kind of this big, and maybe that's the neural pathway that you were talking about. And my job is to leave this one, you know, unflexed and start flexing the other one. So that would be the talking to yourself, you know, do this, you said you were going to.
Yeah. Talking literally blocks your thoughts. It's called thought blocking. And so you can sometimes get going on something that otherwise you might not.
Okay. So let's think about what else we haven't talked about that might be really important to talk about at this point.
Savor your successes. If you have a little success, a little tiny success, you floss one tooth, enjoy it. You're more likely to do it again. And think about it during the day. I flossed a tooth last night. That was good. I'm now starting to get in the habit of flossing. That savoring and thinking about it is a form of repeating. So do a lot of it.
Interesting. That's an interesting way to think about. So the savoring itself is a kind of repeating.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to actually do the task. You can acknowledge yourself for having done the task, and that also grooves that river.
Your brain has these little twitches that are going on when you're thinking about it that are somewhat similar to actually doing it. So you get sort of a bonus. Think about the fact you've done it, enjoy it, you get a bonus. It's as if you've done a little bit of repeating.
So can we think about any examples where you might have taught a client, or you yourself might use savoring a success?
Yeah, I had a client who wasn't doing projects, and they did the outline of projects, and that's all they did. And they were saying, but I'm not doing my project yet. And I said, yeah, but you're also not liking the fact you've done an outline. And so the next time they did the outline, and they started trying literally every hour on the hour. They'd think, I've got my outline done. That was good. Mm-hmm. And they did that for one day, and the next day they actually started doing their second page. And then they were able to say, I've got 2 pages done of this project. And they said they thought in part, and I think that's true, it was because they were saying it out loud, they were savoring it, they were enjoying it, it felt worthwhile, and it kind of moved them towards the new pattern.
Yeah, interesting. So do you call those waypoints like milestones, or do you have a term you use for when somebody is going from point A to some faraway point B, but they're making that successive approximation?
Yeah,
or?
Successive steps, milestones, both of them used, and things that get in the way we call speed bumps. And we try to figure out how to make progress without those speed bumps.
Got it. So in the last 3 minutes of our show, is there something that we want to understand or review, underscore? There may be something that we've already said that would be really important. I love the Grand Canyon.
I think it's important to think about trying to work with your brain versus against it. And so the pattern, grooving a new pattern is it, but also understand your brain gets tired. And if you're going to try to do a new thing, take care of it. Don't waste energy. So if I'm trying to stop smoking and control my weight at the same time, that's much more exhausting than doing one or the other. And if I've had a hard day at work and I come home, it's easier to start to eat. So there's this issue of kind of harboring willpower, keeping the willpower, taking care of it.
Yeah.
And not exhausting yourself too much in the process. So that would be the piece that I would add is do little things, enjoy the little things, don't take too big a bite, don't wear yourself out. Don't try to start something when you're exhausted. Maybe start it on your vacation or on the weekend.
Uh-huh.
So.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Well, I really appreciate you sharing this wisdom and over 30 years experience. And I wanted to close telling you an example that I heard recently that I liked, and I don't think I've shared with you, and that was the recommendation that you don't window shop if when you get home you're trying to eat healthfully, because you may wear out that willpower. Mm-hmm. That I was trying to think of other interesting examples, but some of them I hadn't thought about before, of the ways in which we're having to say no to ourselves, mm-hmm. even if they seem overtly pretty easy. So I just...
Yeah, research shows tiny little decisions can wear you down. Decisions we're not even thinking about, don't pay any attention to, and yet in the next experiment suddenly they find somebody is more likely to eat more candy or
yell at the kids,
something that they might not have been doing, but because they made a couple of little decisions, they're worn out.
Yeah.